Kia ora, you're at a loss. A podcast series about living fully, even when death makes its presence felt. My name's Timothy Giles, and in my work as a funeral celebrant, I get to meet a lot of people who have, if not mastered that aspect of life, at least having a really good crack at it. And then there's some people, Nic Russell, who I just wonder what you're up to. You talk to children about death. Well, are you destroying their childhoods? What are you doing, Nic?
No, I think when you think about it, Giles, like 1 in 20 children will experience the death of a significant family member before they're 18 years of age. That's a lot of kids. And I think with children, you're much better to tell children a sad truth than a mistruth, and wrap your coping arms around them to help them deal with that tough stuff, because children know...
Hang on. What does it say? You are better to tell a child
a sad truth than a mistruth, and wrap the coping mechanisms that they need around them to help them deal with it.
Can you give me an example?
Well, from my own personal experience, for example, whenever my daughter Kenzie was sick with cancer, she was diagnosed in 2005. And at the end of that year, she developed septicemia and was going to die. So with her brother Connor, he was 2 years older than her, he was 5. And before we brought him in to see Kenzie in the paediatric intensive care unit, where she was hooked up to machines, I took photographs of the machines before we took Connor in. We sat Connor outside and I showed Connor the photographs of the machines, and I said to Connor, Kenzie's body is really struggling to work at the minute. She's very, very sick and her body needs a rest to help her to try and get better. So these machines, what you're going to see Kenzie hooked up to, is working for her body so she can have a rest to try and get her better. So we brought Connor into the room. He got to touch Kenzie. He got to ask questions. He was quiet. He took it all in. Unfortunately, at the end of that week, Kenzie was going to die. Connor was in that room. You know, it was explained to Connor that Kenzie's body just would no longer work. It was like a car that broke down and could not be fixed. She got a lemon, it wouldn't work. The body and the soul being two different things. It was an analogy a 5-year-old could understand. He was part of that process. He was not shut out of it the whole way through. And it meant as Connor grew older that those tough subjects and those tough questions, he always felt he could ask me and he would be given the truthful answer. And we would help him deal with those tough emotions that he would feel around it. And that, to me, is a much better approach. And research has shown that's a much better approach with young people. But I think we are a death-averse society. We don't like talking about death even as adults.
Can I come to that in a moment?
Yes, of course you can.
Parenting gold star.
Oh, thank you.
Your baby girl was dying.
Yes.
And you knew that.
Yes.
And you were able to look after Connor. Kenzie is there, and you must have been angry and devastated, right? And all of I can barely guess at the emotions that you were feeling, and that you're losing your little girl, and the rage and all of these things, and yet you managed to find that space for that level of skillful parenting.
Well, I think as a parent, for many of us that are parents, you're thrown into, and grief is overwhelming. You can't explain how it feels, traumatic grief, when you lose a child. It is the ultimate, I feel. But it also, when you've got other children, you know, for me, when I looked at Connor, I still had the thought in mind that how I dealt with my grief would ultimately influence how he dealt with his grief. It would shape his childhood and the man that he would become. So I knew right even from that point how we dealt with it would leave a lasting imprint on him and how he would develop moving forward. So he was part of that journey. And I think, you know, I worked in the UK as a hospital play specialist in hospitals with sick children and families.
A hospital play specialist.
So what you're doing is you're helping young children and their families understand what's happening to them in the hospital setting. So my background was in that area of working in health. And
so you had a bit of a head start.
I had a bit of a head start.
Okay.
So
thank goodness, because I'm just looking at that thinking, what sort of superwoman are you?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and I was an early childhood educator, so I trained in the field. So I had, you know, some insights about what to do in those situations. But we know these are not easy conversations to have. They are very difficult conversations to have. As adults, we find it hard to talk about death anyhow. As I said, we are a death-averse society. We really struggle with it. But I think we've got to put our children to the forefront and go, we know by talking about it, because when grief is shared, it feels less lonely. And so you don't want your child to grieve alone. You don't want to grieve alone. Sometimes we all, even in relationships, we have to do our grief our own way. But I think, when you can speak your loved one's name, even as a child, if you can share those memories, honour those memories, and help foster those conversations, they all help.
So, talking about Kenzie.
Yes.
And saying her name.
Yes.
And being able to say that, and the sad truth that Connor was right up close with enables Kenzie to still be present?
Well, I think it's for all of us whenever we've experienced a loss. Your person was. They have left an imprint on your life. And I think even if you think about it, if we put it on an adult perspective, if your parent has died as an adult and they've lived a full and fruitful life, and people come to the wake or the funeral, and you hear people starting to talk about the memories. I remember the time when your dad went out and he was driving the car and he was an awful driver, and you start having these memories and conversations. It's like, it brings a smile to your face because you're reliving these wonderful memories that are shared and aspects that you might not have known about your father, because we view parents in a different light and friends will have a different relationship. The same goes with a child or a traumatic loss. If it's been a partner or, an intimate partner, all those losses, we want to talk, we want to share. And but I think because people feel awkward and they don't know what to say, people don't want you to be sad, they want to fix it. It can't be fixed. You've got to, grief is not an easy subject. And I think whenever it first happens, it is so raw. It's like an acute illness. It's so traumatic. It's raw. It's devastating. And as time moves forward, it morphs more into like a chronic condition that you learn to live with. The pain is there. It's an ache that is always there. And sometimes it will flare up and knock you off your feet. You know what I mean? Like an acute attack. And then it will subside again and you'll be able to move forward with life again. But it is always there and it never goes. And I like Dr. Lewis Tonkin's analogy when she said, grief doesn't get any smaller. What happens is your life goes around your grief. And when a traumatic event happens or you get triggered, you go right back into yourself and you internalise. It's like when we're having a stressful event in life, we go into ourselves and we need to shut the world out for a little while where we sort of look after ourselves and recuperate and take stock until we're ready to emerge again. The same is for grief. And I think that was the best analogy I ever heard, because your life does go around it. You can have a fulfilling life, you can have a joyful life and be open to the experiences that life bestows you, because there's joyous moments to be had again in life. And life is sprinkled with pure moments of heaven on earth. They might be few and far between, but they do happen, and not to feel guilty. Because I think in those early stages of grief, when you first start to have a time out experiencing something and you laugh again, and then you feel a bit guilty, am I forgetting? Because that intense sorrow is beginning to ease. You sometimes then you beat yourself up because you're feeling guilty because you're leaving them behind. But that's not the case. I don't feel. I think it's, your life is becoming richer again, and it is enriched because of the love you had for your one that's lost. And I feel my life has been exceptionally enriched for having Kenzie in it. I take, as many parents will say, I take the pain of it. I would never wish never to have had her in my life. When you open your heart to loving someone so deeply, you open your heart, to pure heartbreak and pain and sadness whenever that person goes. And that's if it's an intimate relationship that goes, or if it's the loss of someone that you love so much. But you've got to be able to live a full life moving forward, and I think that's how you can best honour their legacy.
And you have founded a charity?
Yes.
Kenzie's Gift.
Yeah.
3 years you had her, plus you bore her.
Yeah.
Right? So 4 years in your life.
Yeah.
And now, how many years later?
We set up Kenzie's Gift about 3 years after Kenzie died. And the inception for Kenzie's Gift came for me after Kenzie died. I mean, traumatic grief that I was experiencing, and I was facing my own breast cancer treatment at the same time, and I was a single parent at that point. All these losses were too big for friends and family and me to manage on our own. The losses were too great, so I knew I needed professional help because it was too big. So I had a wonderful psychotherapist called Maxine Bergen-Page who gifted her time to me to see me, and she helped me rebuild my shattered life from the pure embers that was left, and she gave me the resilience and the strength of resilience to rebuild my life, to be there for Connor so I could create a brighter future for him, create a brighter future for me, moving forward with this magnitude of a loss that was Kenzie and the other losses that I had experienced. And what I'd also found was there was nothing out there to support the mental health of children and families. There was nothing. I mean, you could pay for therapy, absolutely. I mean, but therapy even back then was a bit...
I looked you up when I was looking for therapists around children and death and grief. And there I found Kenzie's Gift, right? And what's the URL, the web address?
www.kenziesgift.com.
.com. So KENZIES gift.com. You've put some serious resources up. Right. How many years have you been running Kenzie's Gift?
About 12 now.
Right. So you've got resources for how to support grieving children.
Yes.
How to tell children the sad truth.
Yeah.
And that might be someone else has died.
Yeah.
Someone else is dying.
Mm-hmm.
You're dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I do that? How?
I think, I want to point out that I'm not the therapist. You know what I mean? I'm not the therapist. And I think, we have a wonderful team of all of our therapists that we've got are registered mental health professionals. They're either psychologists or they're psychotherapists, specialising in child and adolescent and family work. So they're very highly skilled. So whenever we've developed resources, it's been in conjunction with them, right? So it's not just a mum with an experience and thinking this is what should be. It's not anecdotal. It's actually based in good science. But I think, there's no right and wrong way. I think it's just about being honest and explaining to a child, your child better than anyone, because their personalities are all different. Your family circumstances, your belief systems that you've got. So I think it's about talking to a child in a way, in a language that they understand and is age appropriate. And you will know that as the parent because you know them or the family member that's supporting that child. And it's being open because this has been a sad event. And it's okay for your child to see you crying because this is sad and they get to process. But being part of the process, they get to see this is part of life. And there's some wonderful books out there about life and death for children of young, across the ages, from young school age to adolescence and older.
Death is part of life.
Death is part of life. And that's one thing we all know. We're all going to die. But
no, we don't all know that.
Well,
you called it a death-averse society.
Yes.
Right. I had another conversation in here where Wade Downey, 30 years, funeral director in Barmer, and he said, we're a society of death denial.
Yeah. Well, death averse is the same thing as death denial, but...
so you sit there and you go, death is part of life. And not many people have that conversation, Nick.
Yeah. And I suppose until you're thrown into that, we all, I think, avoid it because we all think we're going to get this long natural life.
Yes.
But bad things happen to good people all the time. Life can be exceptionally cruel to people, and we don't know what happens. It's just pure bad luck. It's like what happened to Kenzie was pure bad luck. She got a body that just would not work. Dud. And, some people try to explain, I ate something or was exposed to something or they must have, in pregnancy. We try to individualise things and find a cause, so we want to prevent that happening to us. Bad luck. There's things that are just pure bad luck. And as I said, life is cruel. So I think when death does happen and you have to tell a child, or if you've been given a terminal diagnosis and somebody is dying, you know, truth is always better because you can work with truth. You can then get the coping mechanisms around you to work through it. Now, is that where it's like your child, you might need a bit of support in helping you. You might need support in helping tell your child. You might need support with helping to parent because your child naturally will get upset. You know, some of them may play out. They might not be sleeping well at school. They may regress in their behaviour, and you may want to get, I actually need a therapist to help me help them, you know. But ask the question. I mean, the support will be there. And some people, you know, just need the tips and advice. That there's lots of resource on the website to go, actually, that's given me, now I know how to broach that subject. There's some, you know, wonderful kits that we've got with activities and stuff that you can help. Because children are better through play, you know, because as adults we can articulate a conversation of how we're feeling, right? Children can't articulate those complex feelings. So for them, often they will show it through play and activities. And sometimes when you're, as a family, reading a book or doing an activity together or a memory activity or creating something together, it opens up the conversations, and it's, you know, you're doing something together which can help, you know, with those tough conversations. And
help with things like understanding that death is final. What are the tough things for a child to conceptualise that play can help with?
Well, I think, I mean, as every stage in childhood, like for your under sevens, you know, they really can't concept that death is finite. So, you know, whenever a child then gets older, you know, they'll start to, as they developmentally increase their understanding, they'll come back to you with more questions. Like Connor, you know, whenever he was 5, you know, we used the analogy of the car for Kenzie. So I'll use my own personal experience. But whenever he was 10, the cat got knocked down and got killed. That was the first time he cried over his sister, because he knew at 10 what death meant. And then he could reflect the fact that, well, actually, my sister's not here, what that permanence actually meant. It triggered something in him. You know, and he cried and I said, you know, Connor, life is just, it's unfair. And I used the word shit. I said, it's just a shit. You know what I mean? It's like, we can't bring her back. You know, I cry because I miss her. I love you as much as I love your sister. But whenever I'm crying, I just miss her. And you're crying, Connor, because you miss her. And it's making sure that, and I was very cognizant of when Connor was growing up, while he seen me cry, he recognised our grief, that he always knew that he was loved as much as his sister. You know what I mean? And whenever I was crying, it was because I was missing her and not loving him any less. So that he felt assured. And I think as so long as children feel loved and secure, you know what I mean, they will be able to get through this really tough stuff. You know what I mean? And it's making sure that, you know, that is, those mechanisms are put around them, and then they have someone, even if you're not feeling your best, that there's someone in the family or a close family member who can be that person, you know, whenever you're not feeling strong enough, you know, to cope, that they have got that go-to person to be there for them, you know. And yeah, but it is about having an honest conversation, you know. And don't use analogies. What we find, and the therapist will often say this, will often say somebody's gone to sleep, or they're in the sky now, or, you know, they haven't gone to sleep, they're dead. Use words, use the D words. They're dead, they have died, their body isn't working anymore. Don't use euphemisms, because children have magical thinking as well. And if they've gone to sleep, well, if I go to sleep, will I wake up again? And we still use these analogies. You know, they're hard words to use. And it's like, but that is what it is. Explain exactly what it is and use that language that they're dead, you know, and what process you're going to. And Nick Connor said to me at the time, now this is what, we buried Kenzie. So, I mean, culturally being Irish, I mean, we always, you know, buried our dead and we have a wake. But Connor, the first thing he said to me was at 5 was, Mummy, you're not going to burn Kenzie, are you? So we didn't cremate her. And it was like, no, Connor, we're not going to burn Kenzie, we are burying Kenzie. So he was part of, you know, the coffin and everything, and we decorated the coffin. And, you know, whenever Kenzie came home, we took her out of the coffin so he could touch the dead body, because she was different from whenever we left the hospital to whenever we come home and took the lid off the coffin so he could see. Wow. And touch her and ask questions. And, you know, he got to say, and whenever she was ready to go to the funeral home for the funeral, the lid went back on, you know, we'd put letters in the coffin with her, you know, and to the ceremony and then to burying her. So it was all, he was part of every process. We didn't shut him out of any of it. It was about being honest, and it wasn't scaring him. And it's like I was involved in a breast cancer campaign shortly after Kenzie died, and we took a coffin down to Parliament, and the coffin was in our house, and we were painting it because we were putting, crosses in it and everything. And Conor was like, "Oh, Mummy, can I get in the coffin?" He wanted to play in the coffin because children play. That's how they do. And it's like, it might have freaked other people out, but he was so used to this is part of play. It's death. It's, part of life and processing it. And that's what he did. And our therapists that work with young children, they'll often use a sand tray. And they've all these little figurines.
A what?
Sand tray.
A sound tray.
Sand.
Oh, sand.
Sand.
Got it. Yeah.
And they'll let the children, express themselves in the sand tray. And often they will get figurines that represent death that they might see on TV. It's Darth Vader or something like that. They will pick up the coffins, they will pick up the skeletons, and they'll have the skeleton down in the sand tray, and they'll have the skeleton in the coffin, and it's or they will have maybe pick a figurine up that represents mum that's no longer here, or dad or somebody that's sad. So they're communicating all through these tools that they've got, or they'll use cards as well, to express, if it's how they're feeling today, or, if they've got anger and all those things, but they're giving them they're using activities and tools with the children to help them process in their way, and they're being guided by the children, and it's what they're showing them is how the therapists work. But yeah.
You have been a part of readying children for the fact that they're going to die. What have you learned?
Again, that would probably be more of a therapist question than me, to be fair, Giles. I think it's, the insights the therapists have are phenomenal, and I think, would be a good guest, on another podcast for you. I think, what the feedback we've been given, from families is about how valuable the therapy has been to help them process stuff that children should not have to face this stuff, and neither should their families. But as I said, life is very, very cruel, and bad things happen to good people.
No, you said life's a shit. That's what you said.
I said life's a shit. So yes, and I think that, you need highly skilled people to help you navigate that stuff, and you need the right support mechanisms there. So, that's why Kenzie's gift was established, because there was a gap in service provision, and there still is a gap. We would love to have loads of resources. We would love to have millions of dollars in the bank. We don't. We're still a small charity. We grow as best we can to meet the demand as we can, and would love to be doing more. It's, I have got numerous jobs because I have to pay bills. Kenzie's gift is my passion, and I'm very dedicated to it because I just see the value in, this can wreck your life, and it can have long-lasting consequences for many people. I've met many adults who lost significant family members as children, and they still haven't processed it in adulthood. And what we really want is to be able to create brighter futures for kids and their families who have had to face the unthinkable, that life can have, that their dreams and ambitions for life can still occur, and they will carry their grief with them. Their life will grow around their grief, where they can have a full life. And sometimes, even though this awful thing has happened, there's positives, believe it or not, Giles, that can come out of it. I've met many young people years after that we have supported, through Kenzie's gift, and they're so compassionate and empathetic and have insights well beyond their years. They're going to be players in this world. They're going to give something back to society and community that maybe if this hadn't happened, they might not have had that insight to, and a force that's driving them. And I think it's probably the memory of their loved one, that creating a legacy that's been left through their loved one, and making their loved one proud. And it's they can achieve wonderful things, and I feel honoured to meet, to have had sit down conversations with some of these young people that we have met and we have helped, and their families. And it's and I think, Kenzie would be 18 this year, and that is her legacy. It is her gift to them, the gift that keeps on giving, I'd like to think, and can continue to grow to help more families in New Zealand who need it.
You've got a project coming up.
Yeah.
Dear Grief.
Yeah.
And The idea, as I understand it, is quite simple. I write a letter to grief.
Yeah. So, Dear Grief, we started 2 years ago was when we first did it for International Children's Bereavement Week, which is in November, which coincides with Kenzie's birthday on the 22nd of November. And that year, Connor wanted to do a memorial tattoo to his sister. I mean, it's he came to me about it. It's what he wanted because Connor's quite a reserved guy. You know, he's laid back. And most parents, as soon as your kid comes to you, I want a tattoo. You're like, absolutely no way. As soon as you sit in memory of Kenzie, of course, darling, let's find a tattoo artist for you. Who's the best tattoo artist we can find. So we filmed it in his journey, and he was open about his message to Dear Grief and how his life is different, you know, compared to what it would have been. And then another young guy that we had been supporting, who's an amazing young talented filmmaker called Luca Wolfgram, did his short film to Dear Grief about his brother Costa that he lost. And it was a powerful opening piece to open up the conversation about grief, because when grief is shared, it feels less lonely. That was, quote, Luca, insights of a 14-year-old boy at the time. Luca's now 16. So, Dear Grief 2020. So we thought we'd like to build on it because it was well received that year. We had many, you know, quotes and tweets and instas from young people and kids about what they said to Dear Grief. And this year it's about writing a handwritten letter to Dear Grief. And we're doing a photo shoot as well. So we have about 15 subjects. So we're doing a photo shoot with a wonderful photographer, Lee Howell, who's giving us wonderful time.
Can we find this online? Where do we engage with this?
You'll be able to go online to kenziesgift.com or else our Facebook page. If they're interested, just email me, nic@kenziesgift.com. At the minute, we've got a full suite for the photography component, so we can't inundate Lee anymore. Unless somebody drops out, we can put somebody else in.
I'm interested in the project and in what you do with that.
So we still want letters. We still want handwritten letters. So that's completely open.
Okay.
And the exhibit will be on the weekend of Kenzie's 18th birthday.
Well, we'll
get to that in a minute.
We'll promote that around the time. But who knows when people are listening to this conversation?
Yeah.
Right? They may be listening to this at some point in the distant future.
And it will also we will showcase it again online as part of it. You know,
KenziesGift.com. Kenzies gift.com. In conclusion. Thank you for coming in here and bringing your radical thinking, and to me it's radical kindness, and it's very courageous. I can only imagine the opposition that you have found, as well as seeing some of the support that is there. So it's a real pleasure to spend some time with you and to get a sense of what is possible. What would your concluding comments be for as we sit here and listen to you?
I think there's no right or wrong way to do grief. You know what I mean? It's like, I had my experience, you'll have your experience. And I think within your own family, know that you're not alone. Reach out if you need help, it is there. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to tell you how to do it, but we will guide you, you know, and give advice. And I think for children, I think, even though it is a tough subject, I think I said it earlier in the piece and I'll say it again in closing remarks. It's better to tell a child a sad truth than a mistruth, and wrap your loving arms around them and help them navigate through. I think honesty is the best key. Yeah. And thank you so much, Giles, for having me on and being able to share the story and inviting me along. It's been an absolute honour, and what you're doing with your podcast is phenomenal, and it's opening up those conversations about grief so people do not feel so alone, and it's a wonderful thing.
This will not be the last conversation that we have, and I suspect not the last one we record either. Nic, just a joy.